All the rupture, no repair. I healed alone, you weren't aware. I'd like to speak about the theme of rupture and repair in relationships. Now, with any relationship, if you spend long enough time with someone in any meaningful relationship, you will have moments of rupture or moments of conflict. And just as it takes two to tango, it takes two to repair after a conflict, after a rupture. And sometimes the ruptures can be small, other times the ruptures can be quite big. I have a decent amount of experience of this whole dynamic of rupture and repair. And what's unfortunate to realize is that you can be in a relationship and you realize that I've been the one doing the repairing the whole time. And then as a result, if I pull back from the repair process, the entire relationship falls apart. I've been over functioning for the partner that's been under functioning, or I've been over investing for the partner that's been under investing. So pulling from one of my examples, there can be rupture in a relationship for a inability to cope with their own emotions, and then as a result they don't put the entity of the relationship first. They put winning first. They put being right first. And if being right means hurting you and hurting the relationship, then that is what they'll do. In the being righteous, with having the truth, having the correct perspective, rather than creating an open invitation to co-author sense-making together, making it a cooperative process to make sense of what happened and to make sense of how to move forward. With this one individual I'm thinking about, I've noticed where, and this is actually with the other situations as well with other people, is there'll be the rupture and there'll just be an assumption that because there's like the calm again, that that crack in the boat has just, or that hole in the boat has miraculously healed itself. When in reality, just like with not addressing a hole in a boat, in a relationship where that repair really hasn't occurred, it's going to just further erode the relationship as things go on. And what I've noticed in the past year for myself is this theme of being able to call it, being able to say enough is enough, or never again, or no more. There comes a point where a relationship gets damaged so much that your body, you cognitively, you forgive them and you want to move on and you want to keep the peace, but your body is not having it. Your body knows that there hasn't been a surrender on their side. There hasn't been enough accountability on their side. There hasn't been that repair coming from them. You can do all you want to try and repair your relationship with that person, but if they're not willing to meet you halfway, it's never going to repair itself. And that's a really hard lesson to learn, and a really hard truth to wake up to and accept. Oftentimes, we can hold on to a relationship that has had too many ruptures already, and the foundations of the relationship have been eroded for a very long time. And we don't want to admit to ourselves that we've been spending so much effort into a relationship that has such an asymmetry in the effort of trying to keep the peace. With one individual, the rupture is in the using being right as justification as to say hurtful things and to have attacks onto, me, verbal attacks or, character attacks, all that stuff, or withdrawing affection, with basically withdrawing the relationship. Like all of a sudden I'm not your friend until because I can't, because I'm angry for 2 weeks straight, and therefore I have a license to treat you poorly. I have a license to be violent towards you in my relationship, whether that's violence through silence, through withdrawal, or having constant criticisms of you. So there's that, in terms of forms of rupture. And then I also want to point to another form of rupture that I've experienced, which was emotional neglect, where there was the moment where I will often find myself investing time, energy, money into something, and that investment never really teetered over. And what I've noticed is that would create a rupture. It would be like a slow burn. And it would be communicated like, hey, this is going on. But then it never, and it gets like acknowledged, let's say, but then it doesn't actually get followed through with. And then, so once again, the same theme around both people got to meet each other at the same spot to actually create a repair in a relationship. Both people have to be willing. Both people have to admit that they were wrong somewhere in the process. And then, of course, there's moments where maybe even unintentionally, or where we act unconsciously, where we say or do something that completely makes the other person feel hurt, feel neglected, or feel attacked or used. And what's interesting is that unless I brought it up as a problem, it would just get swept under the rug. And foolishly, at times, I've done that, where I've just had it swept under the rug because they swept it under the rug. But our bodies knew that wasn't the case. Our minds would like to make a story that everything was okay, but our bodies kept the score. Our bodies knew that there was something under the surface. There was some sort of kraken in the waters. And it bubbled up in moments of being a little bit less kind to each other. It bubbled up in moments of judgment. It bubbled up in taking longer to reply, or, giving more half-assed replies when texting or whatever. And it bubbles up in you starting to analyze absolutely everything. Like, oh, why did he do this or not do that? And, why did she do this or not do that? Like, your mind starts to microanalyze the relationship. Like, like, I'm not really feeling that there's a proper give and take here. And what I've noticed is what actually really got me out of this cycle of, rupture, repair, rupture, of this cycle of trying to repair a relationship that didn't want to be repaired, was to own the truth of that, to own the truth that, you know what, maybe this individual simply didn't have the capacity to admit they're wrong, or to even be aware, or to just open their mind that they could play a part in that conflict. And the craziest thing for me during this whole process of learning about rupture and repair and that whole theme with relationships is that you can totally heal yourself. You can totally forgive the other person and it can be all good. And cognitively, you can be like, yeah, like it's whatever. Like I understand, like it's your patterns, it's your trauma, it's your this, it's your that. But at the end of the day, your body still will keep the score. And so when even though as much as I wanted to maintain connection, I had to make a vow to myself to cut connection altogether. And that was really difficult. And the reason why I had to cut connection altogether was simply because I felt like I was walking on eggshells around this person. I felt that tension in my chest, that tightness. And I felt that fear. I felt that uneasiness. I felt I had to filter myself more. I felt like there was some sort of tough conversation to have, but I would have to be the one to bring it up. And so then I'm always going to be the bad guy. And I don't want to be the bad guy every day. I don't want to have to be the guy that brings up the truth. And even when that happens, I have to like layer it with like, shit sandwiches, like, well, you're good here, but here's the criticism, but you're good here, or whatever. And I've noticed the hardest part with that whole process was there are some individuals that simply will not even be able to understand you. They will not even be willing to meet you where they're at. They will not have the level of consciousness to really understand the wrongs or, more precisely the hurts they created. They won't actually be able to go into your perspective and see how they hurt you in that situation, especially if they felt justified for their actions. And when I really deeply grasped that, that's when I let go of the rope of the relationship. That's when I realized, like, I love this person very much, but my body is telling me unless this is addressed and repaired, and there's a serious recognition and a serious effort towards changing that, it's not safe for me emotionally to be around this individual. And that's one of the hardest things I've learned in the last several months of my life here, is that you're not going to be acknowledged by the other person. You're not going to be understood by the other person. You have to fully take your sovereignty and your authority back. You have to trust your body, and you're the one that has the word on what's correct. And that can be very difficult when you spent your whole life looking for other people's approval, looking for the other person's opinion. And once you have one rupture after another, after another, after another, and none of them get repaired, all of them get either half acknowledged or completely swept under the rug, the relationship deteriorates and there's nothing left. And it's hard to see because you're not trying to create that rupture, but for whatever reason, the situation, the personality clash, the difference in the level of mental health, the pressures on that individual, the pressures that person creates for themselves. It's really admitting that there's so much about relationships that is not in your control at all. And that's a tough pill to swallow. We either can grow together or we can grow apart. And I've noticed in my personal growth with relationships in my past where It's hard to admit you're growing apart from someone. You want to grow together with that person because, being with that person fulfills some needs for you. It keeps you from feeling alone. There's a lot of things you do connect on and you do feel understood on, and, you do feel that companionship, and you do feel loved, or at times you feel loved, or at times you feel appreciated. But with these with these moments in relationships where you have so much rupture and there's not that repair there, eventually the bad from that outweighs the good. The drawbacks outweigh the benefits. The drawbacks of living in a constant state of walking on eggshells. The drawbacks of waiting for the next whip to come. Waiting for the next lash to come in the relationship. And the worst part about it is that when you do, make a decision to stop seeing that person, and maybe you block them or you say your goodbyes, they're not going to understand. They're not going to understand that you're simply just trying to protect yourself. You're listening to your body for once, rather than listening to what they have to say. They're going to spin it into their interpretation, into their narrative. They're going to interpret you looking after yourself, saying yes to yourself by saying no to them, by setting a boundary. They're going to look at you saying yes to yourself as, oh, that person's just coping, or, oh, that person is lost in self-deception, or, oh, that person is this or that, when ironically it's the other way around. And so I think one of the biggest things I've noticed in relationships is this trap of trying to feel understood. As soon as you're trying to feel understood, or as soon as you need the other person to understand something, you've given your power away. Stop needing that person in your life that you're having a conflict with, they've had many moments of rupture with. Stop needing them to understand your perspective. If they want to understand your perspective, they will figure it out. They will introspect on their own, and they will come to that consciousness on their own accord. They will come to the truth on their own. And oftentimes that's emotionally difficult. And that really only happens if they're truly attached to you, if they truly want to make amends. Oftentimes I've noticed with individuals that have poor attachment styles, this never happens. So if you grew up with a mother and a father that for whatever reason you couldn't attach, or they couldn't attach to you, for whatever reason you never experienced actually strong attachment in your life, that's going to impact your ability to repair any relationship in your future, because you don't even know what secure attachment feels like. And without the foundation of secure attachment, then you're not going to have that natural pull to repair a relationship after a rupture. And so that's what I've noticed with some people in my life, where it's like, oh, that helps explain it a little bit more. It's not the whole story, but it is one perspective that does fit quite well. And with that, what I've noticed is when I truly accept what's the truth, when usually the truth is, oh, if they actually understood, they would be apologizing. If they actually understood the hurt they created, they would be actively trying to fix it. If they understood the hurt they created, and also had a desire to maintain the relationship. Oftentimes we can get addicted to a relationship that keeps on hurting us. And something I've heard recently was very wise, where when we have really low lows in a relationship, getting back to baseline can seem like a high. Where we'll have our highs and lows in a relationship, but sometimes we'll get to just the baseline where there's peace, and then we'll just get to the low lows. And then that's your spectrum. And then that becomes a very addictive or a very toxic place to be in, because you're completely blinded. You're a fish in water. You don't even realize the amount of neglect that you're experiencing. You don't realize the amount of abuse that you're experiencing. You don't realize the asymmetry, the imbalance in the relationship. And that was for me. I've noticed I love to invest into relationships. I love to make a relationship into a project. And by that, I simply mean, putting together gifts, or, putting together thoughtful experiences, or writing thoughtful things, or whatever, right? Or creating experiences together, or whatever it is. As an Aquarius, the best way to jive with me is to actually work on some sort of project together. So it checks out. And what I've noticed is that oftentimes I will put more effort into a relationship without it being mirrored back. And that's hard to accept. And oftentimes it can simply just be because that person doesn't have that capacity to. Or, and if I pull from direct experiences, that person is used to things being super asymmetrical, where the guy just invests and invests and invests, and it's like, thank you. And I'm like, it's kind of like sitting there like, okay, but like, where's my thought? What is there anything that you can show that you've been thinking about me? Is there anything you can show that that you've been putting thought towards us or the relationship or me? And there'll be indicators, right? And when those indicators don't show up, more of a side note, more of a side tangent, not as quite precise on this specific topic around rupture and repair. So to close, notice places in your life where you have experienced rupture in a relationship, whether it's intimate, whether it was a best friend, a parent, your child, or in a workplace. Workplace especially, those are the hardest ones to repair, because sometimes you gotta be like, hey, I've noticed that since this incident, I haven't really felt safe around you, or whatever, to actually bring that up. That can be very threatening, especially if they're a superior in rank in whatever way that means. I've noticed if those don't go addressed, those dragons will grow. You know, as Jordan Peterson has said, slay the dragons when they're small, because otherwise they'll just grow. And there's like a children's book illustrating that, where it's a tiny dragon and it just grows and grows and grows until it's cartoonishly taking up all the space in the entire house. And now the rupture becomes the elephant in the room that neither person has the courage to address, because it addresses like, hey, we're on rocky waters, like, or hey, is this relationship actually working out? To check in, like, hey, are we both bought in, and do we both want to like each other here, or do we want to keep liking each other here? We gotta address this hole in our boat if you want to keep floating along this river together in this relationship. And oftentimes we're not taught this. And so if you're especially an individual that is really in tune with your emotions, you're going to be the one that feels it more. And you're going to be the one that is like, yeah, no, we need to address this. And maybe the other person is like, well, what do you mean you need to address this? It's like, yeah, because this is creating friction in our relationship. And that has to be met with an open mind and an open heart, not met with like, well, I'm going to do this or that, like, but like, what about when you did this and this and this, and what about when you did wrong that and that? That's not listening. That's just defending themselves and their mind closing and their ego just going completely coiling up and not being able to accept that, maybe I was wrong here. So where in your life do you notice a difficult conversation that needs to be had? Maybe something happened years ago and you're like, I still haven't forgiven you for this. And there's a degree where that has to happen on your own. There's beautiful forgiveness exercises out there. One amazing one is from actualized.org there, with how to forgive others who hurt you. There is an amazing one called like the reach technique in the book Authentic Happiness. And of course, there's many other techniques as well. And, once you can forgive on your own end, then to still realize like, my body's still feeling this. Like, hey, I want to make sure that the relationship doesn't get damaged again. I want to make sure I don't get hurt again. I want to make sure that I feel safe again. You remember that time that you did this years ago, and like, I still haven't felt like there's something there, like the core of it hasn't been addressed. There's something that hasn't been acknowledged. There's a pain that you must face about how that made me feel. For me to really feel seen and understood, so that I can really feel safe again. Where in your life do you have those conversations? And notice the places in your life, with the people in your life that you do not have the courage to have the conversation. And start to inquire into why. Start to question why you don't have that courage. Whether it's you're scared the relationship is gonna be uprooted or dissolve, or and you're worried about your employment or whatever, because especially if something's really bothering you, next thing you know, there's another small rupture and you just explode. And the person's like, whoa, where did that come from? Like, that's an overreaction. And yeah, it can look like that on the outside, but no boat will tip over with just a couple waves. There was already a storm that that person was facing. And so to recontextualize those moments of those real outbursts. So a little bit scattered today, but that's part of the territory around the level of clarity I have about what I really want to communicate to you. I was really inspired to speak around this whole theme, thinking about people in my life and the peace that I've created when I've really been able to just letting go of people needing to understand, letting go of needing that forgiveness to happen like through them understanding, right? And just healing myself on my own and making that decision to protect myself, to protect my body, and to listen to my body. Like, hey, I'm feeling like I'm walking on eggshells. Hey, I don't feel safe around you. Those are some pretty good indicators. And it's probably because there's been so much rupture that my body is now telling me like, hey, you're not safe. So thanks for watching. And if you found this video or other videos of mine impactful, please give it a share. Share it with other people. I appreciate the comments and I read all of them. So thank you.